Welcome to Mobility at Work. This podcast is brought to you by SYNDES Technologies. SYNDES is the leading enterprise mobility strategist in Southeast Asia, and we help you to manage, secure and control company-backed devices in a single dashboard. Continue listen. Enterprise Mobility Management, or known as EMM, is the lifeblood of SYNDES Technologies. Although we only switched our business model to focus on enterprise mobility about a few years ago, we've always been curious about its origins and evolutions. Join us in looking back at the humble beginning of enterprise mobility and the devices involved. Let's start off with the fact there would be no EMM without desktop management. I think it's fairly obvious the desktop computer as the predecessors to what makes smart devices smart came first. The first personal desktop computer was released in 1971, but the earliest standard for desktop management came much later, known as Desktop Management Interface. They were promulgated by the Distributed Management Task Force in 1994 before being superseded by the Desktop and Mobile Architecture for System Hardware. As the name implies, desktop management allows the users to monitor the status of computers in a given network and control them remotely if needed. You're probably familiar with remote assistant programs like TeamViewer, right? But you can do so much more with desktop management solutions. From a central console, they can customize the setup of the computers, install and update programs, and enforce security policies to protect the businesses. Sound familiar to you, right? So before we go through how EMM solutions come to be, let's talk about the history of work devices. Before smart mobile devices were used for work, there were single-purpose devices running on embedded systems. Embedded systems are a combination of software and hardware that have dedicated functions for a larger system. For example, a barcode scanner or a pager. Embedded systems devices are much simpler than desktop computers with weaker processors and smaller device memory, and they consume less battery. Some of them are battery powered. Since such devices require communicating with others to work, unified connectivity protocols with the rest of the device network is important. More complex devices may be powered by embedded operating system or OS that resemble desktop operating system but scaled down for reduced device processing power and energy consumption. So, embedded system devices have been in the market for decades, but the release of personal digital assistants, or known as PDAs, in the 1990s marked the transition of work devices to being multi-purpose, multitasking, and smart. You could argue the PDAs are the ancestor of smart devices. Their OS remains scaled down compared to their desktop counterparts, but you can now do more or less with them. Windows CE is one of the more popular OS that have been used in not only PDAs but also point of sale, or known as POS, terminals, cable TV boxes, and many other devices. This is quite familiar again. Before we proceed, think about what OS POS terminals and cable TV boxes use now. We can see that in the past, EMM involved managing embedded system. Well, you may be wondering how did we get to where we are now in EMM, right? Let's finally have a look at how smart mobile devices were able to support EMM. BlackBerry were the pioneers of smart mobile devices in the early 2000s, but it took them more than a decade to work on EMM. This makes Android and iOS the first smart mobile devices to be exposed to EMM. When the first Android and iOS smartphones were launched for the consumer market, it was difficult to trust them. The first few versions of OS had no way to manage or monitor these devices. Even though they're full of potential, how could employers ensure the devices remain secure in work contexts? It took a few years after the first device that came with iOS and Android for device management to finally arrive with the release of iOS 4 and Android 2.2. Subsequent versions continue expanding on device management features, transforming smart mobile devices into an indispensable component of EMM. The capabilities of Android and iOS devices far exceed that of embedded system, and we can manage them similar to how we have been managing desktops. Therefore, the function of certain embedded systems and devices can then be absorbed into smart devices. Remember the barcode scanner and pager I mentioned just now? They are replacement mobile applications. That's why devices once powered by embedded OS are now embracing the power of Android instead. But the story of the embedded system doesn't end there. Enter the Internet of Things. The conversation of EMM devices history wouldn't be complete without talking about Internet of Things. Simply put, it's any form of electronics or things that can connect to one another on the Internet. This is why embedded systems are here to stay for things that are in between simple and complex. I'll use a fridge to illustrate. You can't turn a fridge into an app, but at the same time, not everyone wants a fridge powered by Android. If you want to know about the very first thing that can connect to one another, you'll have to travel back 2 centuries for the telegraph. But on a serious note, if you're looking for the earliest from IoT, it was envisioned sometimes in the 1980s after the emergence of PCs and the internet. Once the World Wide Web was launched, the rest was history. Existing devices can be easily upgraded to connect to take inputs over the World Wide Web. IoT for work, also known as the Industrial Internet of Things, started off in factories with configuring programmable logic controller over the internet. IoT as a term was coined in 1999 to promote a now famous component of IoT radio, or known as RFID. IoT has been developing in the background before becoming well known after the rise of EMM in the 2010s. That's where smart mobile devices OS started integrating with IoT devices. It's no surprise that EMM Solutions have decided to seize the opportunity to incorporate managing IoT into their functions. Sadly, good opportunity always come with bad ones. Cybersecurity becomes a main concern since hackers now have convenient way to compromise IoT devices. What happens if your car gets hijacked as soon as connected to the internet? This is ongoing challenges. So far, we've been going through the history of EMM devices. What about EMM solutions? They have their own history. Over the years, many solutions have come and gone. These solutions of 2000s are quite different from those of 2010s. 2010 was indeed the turning point with the introduction of EMM features in Android and iOS, and the number of tech companies developing solutions rapidly increased after that. Our partner solution Hexnot and SkillFusion was released in 2013 and 15, respectively. Before that year, SOTI and AirWatch were working on EMM solution for mobile handheld devices. SOTI's solution is currently known as SOTI Mobile Control, and AirWatch has been acquired by VMware with their EMM solution renamed to Workspace ONE. Some solutions that were discontinued a few years ago are McAfee, EMM, and Semantic Mobile Management. The next step for this solution is to evolve into what's known as Unified Endpoint Management, or known as UEM. Endpoints refers to desktop mobile devices and things. Managing every device that can connect to the internet is much more convenient than just mobile devices. Thus, many solutions are rebranding themselves as UEM ones. Who knows what future devices will be there to manage, right? The history of managing mobile devices for work is a very fascinating one. First, we started off with desktop and desktop management, followed by embedded system, PDAs, and finally smart mobile devices and their management solutions. You can imagine how work devices and management solutions have evolved greatly over the decades. We hope you're excited about the future EMM after tuning in with us. Thank you for listening to Mobility at Work. Do check out our website, syndes.biz, and follow us on social media for more content about managing your business with technologies. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye!